Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Feels like a long time has passed since I was sitting here having puja with everyone in this Dhamma hall here at Abhayagiri. Feel like in some ways I haven't quite returned from my vasa at Pacific Hermitage and all the stops along the way to coming back here. I've barely connected with a sense of being back in the forest with, of course, the fires and the time we spent away before even coming back here. And some of the events, even since we've been back. I've had a few hours one afternoon up in the forest in my kuti. And I'm looking forward to settling back in. And to being with community too. It's been quite a while, and there's several new faces, even just in the past few months while I was gone. So just starting to get a feeling of returning and presence here with everybody. But it feels really good to be back. I enjoy being at the Hermitage with Ajahn Sudanto and the community up there. And it's also equally as nice and supportive and a good feeling of community being here. So it's great to have options that are both very attractive options for living this life. Of course, the major experience for us all in the past bit of time have been the fires, and we're just sort of slowly starting to settle back in from all of the chaos, excitement, distractions, and necessary things that we are doing to get ourselves back into a semblance of a routine. And we can, here at the monastery, count ourselves as very fortunate that the fires barely affected us, and because those of our friends and supporters right around us have suffered some significant losses and have had to do some major reconstruction of their lives. Not an easy thing to do. So we can feel very blessed for all of the reasons, the firefighters, the forces of nature, the forces of goodness on this property, the support of friends, and everything we've done to prepare for what we knew would probably eventually happen here at the monastery. Ever since we've been here, we've kind of recognized that we're sitting in a tinderbox, and that sooner or later there would be a fire that would sweep through here. And in some ways, it really hasn't swept through here. We're still in that very, very close mode, and we've still got enough dry tinder and twigs and grasses on this property that it could ignite even before this fire year is over, although seems like we had a little bit of spell of rain to help us, but one never knows, and there's plenty of fuel out there, so we can't feel too complacent, really. If not this year, then likely some other time in the foreseeable future. So as Luang Por was talking about the other day in a reflection, to just use this to reflect on and keep reminding ourselves of the transiency of our living places, of our abodes, and to really help use that reflection to keep us focused on why it is that we're here. The tendency is to get really focused on an event like this, and to, the natural tendency of most of the world anyway is to look for causes and reasons and possibly in some ways blame. Why did this have to happen? Why me, in a sense? Why fires? Why hurricanes? All the other natural disasters that have affected our country this year. It's been quite a year. But appreciating Luang Por Liam's reflections in that letter that Tan Kovilo sent to us, and realizing that we're just part of this natural process. We can't really find a cause or cast a blame quite so easily. Even myself, I found myself thinking, well, what was the cause of this fire? And we were talking about, well, 99% of fires are related to some sort of human action, and possibly so, I guess, in this case, but one that seems relatively blameless in a way. Downed power lines, high winds, sparks setting off a fire and being carried by incredible wind speeds. The fire ripped through here, reminiscent of like, I just was watching some parts of a documentary on the Vietnam War, and they showed some footage of napalm across the Vietnamese countryside, and how just in a matter of seconds, vast acreage of forest would be ablaze with fire. And some of the descriptions of the fire here are reminiscent of that kind of napalm bombing. And really realizing that there really wasn't a lot of individual control over the situation, but our tendency is to, I found myself thinking, well, when they re-put up the power lines, they should bury them, and that was the problem, is that we have all these power lines and that are overhead, and it would be a whole lot safer if they would just spend the money to bury them. And of course, if you did something like that, people would complain about the increased taxes that it takes to to do something like that, and the expense of it. And this is kind of interesting habit that we have of trying to control everything, trying to make everything a safe haven, trying to insure against damage, insure against loss, and provide a security in the world around us that never will be possible to that extent. As Ajahn Liam said, the fire was just doing what fire does. And in this case, the combination of the two elements of fire and air, fire and wind, forming a powerful combination of forces, and the rapidity of the change in the earth and the houses and lives that were caught up in it. Just a strong, very, very powerful experience of natural conditions, with really no control over that. And that's a lot of the way the world is. we like to think that there's a sense of control and a place that we can create that will be secure and comfortable within our physical existence, but just keeps on pointing back to the teachings of the fact that there really is only a modicum of control that we have in the world around us, the events, our lives, the experiences that we have, and that the only real control we have is how we internally respond in a way that will lead us away from suffering and into freedom of the mind, freedom of the heart, as Ajahn Chah would call it, our real home. There's a number of laws of nature that point to this relative lack of control, and we've experienced in full intensity one of those experiences, the law. I think the commentaries or Abhidhamma commentaries and the Abhidhamma talk about the niyamas, the various natural laws of samsara, if you will. That this one of weather and geological conditions, utu niyama, is one where there's really no individual control. There's forces of nature that play out, the laws of air, earth, wind, and fire as they manifest, the movements of the earth, the weather conditions. All of these are certain laws of nature. The laws of genetics and biology, the fact that there are certain ways that we develop along natural laws, from the union of sperm and egg, and in all the other natural ways the plants, animals, humans grow, develop, and evolve. Is one of the other laws of nature, bija niyama. The citta niyama, the laws of the mind, how the mind, various mind factors, psychological forces have their own tendencies, and things like mental factors of the 5 universal mental factors: contact, feeling, perception, attention, and intention, how they work with each other, combine, influence each other, those kinds of natural laws of the mind, and psychology, the flow of thoughts, emotions, and the mental world, and how we react to those and the results that they have follow certain orderliness in some ways. Spend an awful lot of time sometimes in this Western world trying to fix those, make them perfect, and manipulate them in ways to alleviate our suffering. Again, with some modicum of control, but not absolute control. Kamma niyama, the laws of kamma as they interact with the other laws, the intentional actions, body, speech, and mind, and the results that arise from that. Generally, good actions leading to pleasurable results, unskillful actions leading to unpleasant results, and mixtures of the two. Kamma niyama. And then the Dhamma niyama, the patterns, the laws of Dhamma. Yesterday at the ceremony for honoring the former king and the cremation that will be happening soon, the request for chanting was a request for the Dhamma Niyama Sutta, which I couldn't remember where it came from, and looked it up, and it's from the Anguttaras, Anguttara 3s. And it's one that's now apparently in our chanting book. I haven't looked at it myself, but Ajahn Sri Panya was mentioning that it's in there, and it's one that's often chanted in Thailand. But it was chanted yesterday, and it's one that many people are familiar with. a short sutta, but somewhere along the lines of whether or not a Tathagata arises in the world, there are these laws of Dhamma. And essentially, the Buddha then enumerates the characteristics. There is the law or the process of anicca, impermanence, inconstancy. And the Tathagata discovers that and realizes it and penetrates it and teaches it. Similarly, the law of, or the characteristic of dukkha, and the characteristic that all phenomena are not self. That whether or not a Tathagata exists in the world, these laws are part of the nature of the world around us. Dhamma niyama. And when a Tathagata does arise, he understands and penetrates and teaches these Dhamma laws. And a very useful, strong reflection, particularly at a time like this, the King of Thailand having been a very, very revered figure in the Thai society, and the level of stability that his presence gave to the country, in the uncertainty and sadness that arose when he passed away, even though it was quite expected. The Dhamma Niyama Sutta reminds us that even these powerful long-term forces for good are transient. They arise and they cease, and who knows what will come up in its wake. We look at the world around us and the countries, the country that we're in, and our allies and our enemies, and how those are constantly in flux, how those are constantly changing. And sometimes there's good rulers, insightful rulers like the former king of Thailand. Sometimes there's evil forces at play, and how quickly those can change, giving way to good forces in some countries, and good forces giving way to unskillful forces in other places, and the rapidity, just even in our lifetime, how that changes from place to place, time to time. So the request for that chanting of that sutta is to remind us of that. And to point that our only real stable refuge is realizing the truth that takes us beyond samsara. We had a visitor earlier this week, just I think 1 or 2 days after we arrived back here, and he appeared in the Dhamma hall just before the mealtime, and Luang Pa asked him, "Where are you from?" And the response from this visitor wasn't probably what we all expected. He said something along the lines of, I come from beginningless time, obstructed by ignorance, or born from ignorance. I can't remember exactly how he phrased it. And it wasn't exactly the most socially appropriate kind of response. More just wondering whether it was from Ukiah or Willits, rather than the ultimate metaphysical answer. But that's what we got. And in essence, if you look beyond the kind of social inappropriateness of the response, it's true. What he said was spot on, and that's where we're all from. We're all from. We're all born from ignorance, since inconceivable from an inconceivable beginning. There's the very well-known teaching from the Buddha, reflection from the Buddha, that is a favorite of, monks, this samsara is without a discoverable beginning, from an undiscernible first point, beings have been roaming and wandering on endlessly, obstructed by ignorance and fettered by craving. So that gives us a sense that it's a greater issue, much greater experience that we need to reflect on well beyond our daily ups and downs, and even the extreme moments of gratification and pleasure and happiness that we can experience in the world, and the extreme downside of the forces of destruction of great fires that haven't been seen before in this area, just like the one we had. That, in a sense, it's a very small part of a vast repetition of these kinds of things. And that keeping that big perspective that our friend reminded us of is so important. And to feel the impact of events like this fire, but not to be fooled by them into thinking that they're anything unique or once in a lifetime, or something that now it's over, will never happen again. To use it as a wake-up call, and to remember and to refresh our memories as to what it can bring for us, but not to assign it any unique place in the realm of samsara. And it's our duty as sincere practitioners to really start to realize and penetrate this Dhamma niyama, these aspects of our experience, to really start reflecting, penetrating, and developing our understanding of anicca, dukkha, anatta, the penetration of these characteristics, and seeing how they clearly apply in all of our experience, is our key to freedom. We need tools to develop that understanding. It doesn't come just through reflecting on experiences like we've had, although that's a significant aspect, but we need more tools to help really drive it home, because human mind is fickle. It will let go of this fairly soon, and if we're not careful, we can easily fall back into complacency. We're still doing a good thing here. We're living a good life. We're practicing with precepts and developing community, and learning how to live harmoniously with each other, practicing generosity and kindness. And this is no small accomplishment in this world, and one to be cherished and upheld and promoted and sustained, nourished through what we do as a community. And we also need to really hone in and continue to nourish our contemplative practice too, so that we can develop the skills and the strengths and the spiritual faculties, the fortitude to really penetrate deeply these Dhamma niyamas, and ultimately penetrate the Four Noble Truths, the suffering and the end of suffering. We need tools for that. The Buddha's given us a full set of tools, the Eightfold Path and all of its corollaries. But a few of the tools that have come to mind for me recently are this sense of samvega. I was just getting a wave of that in the car on the way back up yesterday for some reason, not quite sure why, or when we were stopped having a drink. And maybe just the culmination of the intensity of focus with the fires and the outpouring of emotion, in some sense, healthy emotion at the ceremony yesterday, and the immensity of devotion and caring, but also a sense of how fragile this motivation is, how fragile this opportunity is. And at the age of 62, I don't see that I have thousands of years left in this lifetime. The sense of, okay, if it's not a fire, it's going to be some illness or some disease, and if I'm lucky, I've got 20 or 30 years left, but that's only if I'm really lucky. Who knows what's coming up from the past to influence my experience now. So just a real sense of reminding time is precious, no time to waste. Yes, it's good to do good things and to serve others and be around to be supportive and develop community, but I need to also focus on other aspects of the path, and to use the time that I am given, and there's plenty of time if I pay attention and not get lost, but to use that time wisely. Luangpo Piak was visiting us earlier this year, and was in a way praising us and giving us good feedback about our community here and the integrity with which we hold the precepts and lead our lives, the Korwat, very praiseworthy way of our community. And as a motivation, he also added that one thing that he would suggest that we really pay attention to closely is our development of our meditation practice, our contemplative practice. And sometimes I find myself getting a little bit a sense of anxiety over hearing occasionally at times some of the very strong, forceful Kruba Ajahns from Thailand, talking about the intensity of the practice that's needed to make penetration, the countless hours of walking meditation, sitting meditation, chanting practice, to the point of what comes to my mind is to the point of exhaustion. And I feel myself kind of protesting sometimes and lamenting and thinking, I'm doing the best I can. If I do more, I'll just end up collapsing, and what good is that? All these kinds of little stories that probably others are familiar with. I was talking with Ajahn Siripanyo a bit about that, because he was translating for Luangpo Piak during that visit, and was kind of expressing some of those viewpoints, and found a real helpful comment that Ajahn Siri made in one of his conversations he had with Luangpo Piak. Yes, those are elements, that part of right effort of striving can be a useful motivation at times if we're finding ourselves lazy in the practice or not making good use of our time. That kind of admonishment to walk, sit, and be relentless can be motivating if we're caught in that lazy, inactive complacency. But also equally important is when we do have that practice, that opportunity to sit and practice concentration practice, develop samadhi, that we do so in a very conscious way, and that we don't just use that time to indulge in proliferation, which is so easy to do, and that a reflection that helps us cut through that is to really recognize that when we engage in that kind of drifty mental proliferation, even when we have the time to sit and formally practice, when we allow ourselves to proliferate and think that we're actually getting some enjoyment from that, and that's what the motivating factor is. That's why we get lost in it. It's because there's a sense of some sort of pleasurable experience, whether it's a fantasy of the future, or even if it's a remembrance or a gnawing on an old difficulty we had with somebody, or a negative state of mind, how we can sometimes grab onto that and chew on it. As Ajahn Sucitto would say, chewing on it like a bone with no meat on it. Just kind of this constant gnawing, trying to get something from it, but maybe getting just a little bit of flavor. And how we can get lost in the proliferative activities of the mind. And just to understand that if we weren't getting something from it, we probably wouldn't do it. But to reflect on the nature of what it is that we're actually getting and how stable that is, and how really ultimately gratifying that is. And as in any other kind of sensory indulgence, to just reflect on that, reflect on the transiency, reflect on the drawbacks, and to cultivate that deeper sense of peace from something that's a lot simpler, a lot clearer, and that will lead us to a more stable quietude of mind that's clear and open and has the ability to reflect on these Dhamma niyamas in a way that will lead to deeper penetration and understanding and release. So I appreciated that I don't have to feel anxious about the actual amount of time on the cushion or the amount of time walking if there's other things that are I'm working with at the time, but to make sure that when I do have that opportunity, that it's quality time, that it's well spent, that things are put down, and the need to proliferate is recognized and let go of. And so that the real kind of samadhi that isn't, what we often think of as samadhi as this kind of intense, deep, exclusive, one-pointed focus on a very small object. That's really not what samadhi is. Samadhi is this very open clarity that's very distilled and clear, but very spacious and open and with the capacity to reflect and not at all pinched and narrow. We have to expend effort to reduce and eliminate the hindrances or the obstructions that get in the way of that open clarity. But if it comes from a forced, narrow, pinched effort, then that's what we get as a result. So to relax and open and clarify and simplify and to recognize the tendency towards that proliferation, to realize the downside of that, and to just gently let it go, open up, and let the mind relax, open, and be receptive to insight. And that's where we can really develop the insight into those Dhamma niyamas. So those are a couple of the tools, that both that raising up of the samvega, the urgency to practice, the limited time, and the relaxation and openness from establishing a very peaceful, open, clear state of mind, to then understand how it is that we remain locked in the world of conditions. And as that clarity and peace and insight increases, then of course there's the true disenchantment and dispassion with regard to all of the ways of the world. We start to see the incredible transiency of even major events in our lives, like catastrophic fires, and to be able to hold it from a perspective of seeing it all as part of the natural world, the way that the world forces work, and what we do have control over, being how we respond, how we react, how we hold these aspects of our lives, and then how we let go of them to realize a deeper sense of security, a deeper place of refuge, and a very deep sense of peace of mind. So just a few reflections for this afternoon, and I'll leave it there for now.
Impermanence, page 66. Annamayang anicca nisatipatam pannamase.
Sabbe sankhara anicca. All conditioned things are impermanent. Sabbe sankhara dukkha. All conditioned things are dukkha. Sabbe dhamma anatta. Everything is void of self. Aduvam jivitam. Life is not for sure. Duvam maranam. Death is for sure. Avasammayamaritabam. It is inevitable that I'll die. Marana pariyosanam me jivitam. Death is the culmination of my life. Jivitam me aniyatam. My life is uncertain. Maranam me niyatam. My death is certain. Vata, indeed, ayam kayo, this body, achiram, will soon, apeta vinyano, be void of consciousness, chuto, and passed away, adise sati, it will lie, patawing, on the ground, kalingarangiwa, just like a rotten log, nirata, completely void of use, anicca vata sankhara, truly conditioned things cannot last, upadavaya dhammino, their nature is to rise and fall, upajitava niruchanti, having arisen things must cease, Esamupasamo sukho, their stilling is true happiness.
Alaham
Samma sambuddho bhagava, Buddham bhagavantam abhivade.
Swakato
Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang namasami.
Supatipanno
Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sangham Namami.
We need to involve tomorrow morning.